Welcome to Talent Pop Podcast, where we will provide tips and strategies for success in sales, networking, marketing, and business. We will be learning from real stories that will inspire you to unlock your potential, discover your talents, and develop the confidence to take action on your biggest dreams. We are focused on empowering women to connect their passions with their purpose to find true fulfillment. It's time to pop off, queens! Pop off, queens! Hello, this is your host, Amanda O'Connell, and I am here with Kate Costello. She is our Director of HR and Operations. We're so excited to have her here on episode 6. I can't believe it's episode 6 already. We've been talking about some amazing things, and just like kind of going back from the last episode I was on with Olivia McKinley, we were talking about being open-minded quite a bit, and I think it's really important when we talk about I would love to talk about diversity and just kind of what Kate's been doing within our company, and just educating us internally, and just like I think it would help a lot with our clients just to kind of hear how to go about like implementing like a diversity program. And I've learned so much just in the last several months, having Kate here, just helping us kind of letting this all unfold and just helping us implement this in general. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I think that, thank you. I think that the number one challenge right now that most companies are facing is the leap between knowing it's important, making it a priority, committing to the fact that they would like to make improvements or change or progress, and then doing that, and what does it look like, and how do we measure whether we've been successful at that? There's a gap there. Yes. And I think that the way I tried to model our program, our strategy, is Rome wasn't built in a day, right? It's all important. There's a lot of urgency. It's very topical, and yeah, it needs to be done now. It's not something we can keep kicking down the road, but at the same time, we can't do it all today. We can't fix everything today. We can't talk about every single topic today. So how do we decide, what are we talking about now? What are we talking about tomorrow? What are we talking about later in the year? So the first thing that I did was to try to find the natural tie-in points that happen in our lives, things that maybe are already on our calendars that we're already talking about or celebrating. So for example, March was kind of a shoe-in. March was Women's Equal Pay Day. It was International Women's Day. And so it's like, great, let's talk about women. Let's talk about gender equality. Let's talk about the pay gap. Let's talk about the, women in leadership and developing and retaining talented women in our organization. So it was, let's grab a hold of something that's already happening, that we're already talking about, and let's harness the buy-in and the attention, and let's talk about that for March.
Because I think if you just try to attack the whole thing, it's just so overwhelming for companies. And I think I love that like baby step method, like biting off a little bit, chewing it, digesting it, and so we're doing that kind of like on this monthly basis, which has worked out really well so far. I think, it doesn't take too much time out of our busy work days, but it's so important to be able to, implement this. And so I think it's been working really well so far.
I love that. Yeah. And I think that you touched on something that is happening. 2 years ago, people were saying, we need a steering committee, a DEI steering committee. We need a chief diversity officer, or we need someone to head all of this stuff. And we sort of dumped the onus on that person or those people or that group. And so they're actually seeing now kind of almost at the 2 year out of this point, if you will, if we're talking about maybe spring, summer 2020 as like a real kick in the pants, that the rate, the amount and depth of burnout of those employees is actually higher than average.
Oh, interesting.
They're feeling like they have all this pressure, they have all this responsibility and accountability, and instead of it being shared at all levels and places in the organization, that it's on them only, or on just the steering committee, or on just the chief diversity officer, and the burnout, we're about to see all this turnover there. Wow. So it needs to come from all levels of the organization, and I think going back to it needs to be like it is urgent, it is a priority, it is important, but how can we do it in a way that is not going to create not just burnout on those people, but emotional burnout, because sometimes these are topics that are uncomfortable. Sometimes we have to reflect or be introspective, and there is a bit of emotional deposit or withdrawal, I should say.
These are heavy. These are some heavy topics sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. So that was sort of my other aim, was to make sure like we're not emotionally burdening or dumping it on one person or trying to do everything at once and talk about all of these. Everything is important, but we gotta
that makes perfect sense too, because you think, oh, I'll just hire a diversity champion and it'll be done.
Everything's done.
But it's like that's almost like hiring somebody. Oh, here you're responsible for just culture and you make it. But we've realized, no, culture is something we all have to participate in actively. So
it's not one person.
Totally.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Sense. Awesome. And I guess, just any inspiration you have for helping companies to, like, where do they start?
Yeah.
Just all of that.
Yeah. The other thing for us, for organization that really clicked into place, again, March was sort of, International Women's Month, is we're a women co-founded and co-owned business, right? And so I kind of said, well, I think that I would have a lot of buy-in starting here. Yeah. But maybe there's a different touch point for different companies where they can say, where's a really good place that is going to organically make sense, where I can get a lot of buy-in from my team. And it could be different things. Maybe you have a lot of, I don't know, like maybe you have some really great Hispanic or Latino people in leadership, and like maybe there's a lot of diversity there. Like maybe you can kind of start on those topics. You can gain your buy-in and use that as your sort of touching off point.
That's great advice.
Let's get the buy-in, and then you can sort of shift the excitement, shift the buy-in, shift the understanding, and the responsibility to the next topics you touch on, but you're fostering it in a place that's maybe a little more familiar to your team, and then use that as your inspiration to go from there.
What kind of challenges do you see or like have heard about, I guess, with organizations trying to like implement this? And
I think that we're in a really unique situation in the workforce right now where you have a lot of generations, right, all working together from maybe 5, 6, 7 generations, all the way down to, I think, Gen Z. And what is challenging, but I think is moving in the right direction, is older generations, if you will, define diversity in more siloed and more sort of niche ways. So when you say diversity, then you talk about diversity, they think, okay, well, gender and, maybe ethnic diversity.
Yeah.
But as you move down, millennials, our generation, millennials at this point make up 70+% of the workforce. And what's brilliant about that is that millennials define diversity in the most broad way yet. So they define it in terms of maybe it's disability or ability status, neurodiversity. They even define it as socioeconomic backgrounds and things like that, which is great. So I think that there's a challenge in making maybe your more veteran workers understand it in that broad sense. But I think a solution to that challenge is to harness your younger generation's openness and I guess use that, like, grab at that. And they're also a hyper connected generation, right, as are the Gen Zs below us.
That's true.
So maybe taking that and saying, okay, these are these groups here, let's take how they define diversity, let's take their connectedness, and how can we use that for everybody at the organization. I think.
No, that's amazing. That's great advice. I think too, another topic I'd love to kind of touch on is just this concept of leadership. And we talked about this a lot just because it was, International Women's Month and all of that. But I mean, like, just getting ahead, I think it can be daunting, for some groups, right, that where they feel like they want to get ahead, or maybe women wanting to get into leadership positions. How do they go about doing that, and what does that landscape kind of look like?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of challenges there, and a lot of them are not very visible. And so one thing we talked about is you have a lot of very driven, very successful women, female identifying persons coming out of, let's say, college, right, who have, for all this time in school, their their ambition and their drive and their high achievement, their performance has gotten them the things they wanted, has gotten them where they are. And then they come out into the professional landscape, and that's not necessarily the case anymore. There are barriers that, and they're hitting that with a frustration, and they're only reflecting internally, well, what am I doing wrong? Why is this not working anymore? So it's kind of, there's two sort of buckets. One is what the organizations have to do to promote women into leadership roles and to see women as leaders, and then what can the women themselves, what can we do? I think that what women can do is to make sure they're having open, clear, transparent conversations with their mentors and leaders about what their career goals are and what their aspirations are. Women are more likely to kind of assume maybe, well, I assume, my boss knows I work hard, so obviously I want a promotion. But they might not know that. Whereas the males at the organization are more likely to just say it. Yeah, I want that job. And so we sort of lose our opportunities in just thinking, of course they know I want this promotion. Right. But they don't. So having these really transparent conversations with your mentor, your leader, or whatever, about what your goals are. In a lot of companies, you have the travel component. Like, yes, I would be open to travel in that leadership role, or I would be open to whatever that component is. And yes, I want this leadership opportunity, or yes, I want to go to that training.
And so for the organization not to assume, she's got a family, she probably doesn't want to travel. Well, have you asked?
There's this sort of, it's super simple, and yet I think it is really key to a lot of the miscommunication or lack of communication. It literally is just like, just ask her, just ask this person, like, do they want this promotion? Just ask her. Does this person want to travel? Ask them if they want to travel.
I think that's an important
just ask.
Like the assumptions, because like you don't know, even like we talk about this too, like women with families, like, of course I have a family, like, so it's like I think a lot of times there are assumptions that go on, but you can't even assume that person is the caretaker, the main caretaker.
Don't assume, whatever is happening, which isn't to say the two things should be totally disconnected and siloed.
Totally.
But don't make those assumptions on that person's behalf. Like, I don't know, maybe they've got grandparents who live in an in-law apartment who are really, really present. And so, definitely don't assume, just ask and give that person the opportunity. And I think the connection between those two things is to have the open and honest dialogue. So for the organization or the bosses or the mentors, not to assume, ask. And for us as professional women to rise up and meet that side of the deal, right? To have those open and transparent conversations, to express what they want, that they're interested in a promotion or whatever it is, and then that's where we can meet those two things in the middle.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot about just women in the workplace, right? Because we're women. We're women. Many women work in our company. There's women in leadership, that sort of thing, and just this concept of like being confident in yourself and authentically yourself, and not having to change yourself for other people.
100%.
And that's something like I want to pass on to my daughter. Is being like unapologetically you, not feeling like you have to adjust yourself or become more assertive, or like we talk about this concept of what a leader looks like. And we touched on this in the last episode, is like not assuming that, because there's so many different styles, and embracing those styles, and I think breaking down those constructs that we've had for so many years. And like I think you tested us too, like you had us imagine, how do you think of a leader, and who would you imagine to be that way, and what kind of characteristics do they have, and just like kind of reformulating those,
definitely. There was this wonderful marketing campaign done in the UK where they had these, I guess, billboards or whatever you want to call them in tube stations, and it would say, picture in your mind a CEO, or picture in your mind a person at your work who is crying. Is the CEO a man? Is the person who's crying a woman in your mind when you imagine? And like why? Or picture a plumber. It could even be something like that. Picture a plumber. What do you picture? Who is that? What does that person look like in your mind? But you're absolutely right. What it comes down to is how we define in our organization what a leader looks like. What kind of traits, characteristics, performance do we reward? So not just who we promote, but who are we rewarding? And is this prototype of what a leader, or who we're rewarding, who we're promoting? Is it the person who works the longest hours? Is it the person who has no caretaking responsibilities? Is it the person who can prioritize the company and the work above anything else? Because if that's the prototype of the leader of the organization, or just who's getting rewarded in middle management, like, you're cutting out people who can't work 12-hour days, or people who do have caretaking responsibilities. And the truth of the matter is, people who have those things are more likely to be women or people of color. So by creating that as your prototype of what success looks like, or dedication to the organization looks like, you are sort of disenfranchising the women and your employees.
So you're already kind of set up for failure. So
because you're never going to meet that. If the ideal worker is those things, then all these other employees they're already pushed back. They're already set up to fail because they aren't that thing.
We talked about this too a little bit, but pathways to leadership, like making sure. Because you think, so we talked about this too, like you can't slap a Band-Aid on and say, yep, check that box, we're done diversity.
I hired 10 people and 8 of them are ethnically diverse. My work is done.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's not. It's not. It's not. Yeah. And I think that even though, there's a couple of things here. We call DE&I, we sort of use DE&I and the word diversity interchangeably, and they're not really. So you have diversity, you have equity, and you have inclusion. They're actually 3 separate things. And I think that for us, both at our organization, just in general, I think if you do the equity and the inclusion piece first, if you do the work there, if you make your workplace inclusive, if you have equity and you go beyond that and your workers have a sense of belonging and a sense of workplace pride, then you can have more diverse slates of candidates and be bringing in diverse employees.
It's a natural progression.
You can't bring in diverse people, whatever that means in your organization.
Right.
It might look different in Boston versus New York versus San Francisco, but you can't try to just diversify your organization and then not look at culture or belonging or inclusion and think it's going to work, because it's not. You have to look at, what is the socialization look like? What does conformity look like? Is there a conformity issue? Does everybody else look the same? Or, what does success look like? What does a leader look like? So, it's well-intentioned, I think, to just say, well, we need to hire 10 people and I want X many of them to be ethnically diverse, or I want this % to be women. But if we're not doing the work, if we're not addressing policies and practices, if we're not setting the tone of what a leader looks like or what success looks like, they will not succeed from the get-go.
There's definitely a lot of pieces and parts. I think it's like, it sounds simple, but then when you break it down, you have to be strategic about it.
Totally.
And that's, this was just like awesome advice.
Yeah. And like we said at the beginning, it is challenging and it is a lot of work, and it can feel really daunting because it's kind of uncomfortable to say, we're going to talk about this topic before this topic, because you feel like you're deprioritizing something or someone. You're deprioritizing a group of people. And so that's why for me, when I laid out, what is our topic timeline going to be, right? Instead of thinking of it as I'm deprioritizing something, it's like, let's find the ways where we can talk about it. Yeah, let's align it organically in a way that will work for our organization. Because it is uncomfortable to say, well, we're going to talk about this first because this is more important than this other thing over here.
Right.
And that,
where do you start? That's such a good approach.
So I think that trying to come up with a timeline like that and view it through, I cannot talk about it all today. I cannot talk about it all tomorrow, and I will not finish it by next week. Take some of that pressure off, take some of that emotional burden off of you, your organization, your team, whatever. So, and I think also thinking about it as a continuous learning, like, it's
changing and it's evolving.
Definitely.
And I think as we evolve and we take responsibility and we learn, our organizations will, benefit.
And different organizations obviously will have different challenges, right?
Totally.
I mean, there's this sort of tenet that diversity in your organization should mirror what diversity in your community looks like. So again, what a diverse team looks like in Boston might look different than San Francisco.
Yep.
Will look different than like London or Paris or what have you, right?
Yep.
It's not, it's not a chart and you like check the box.
Yeah.
It's going to be different.
Totally.
But also that means that different organizations will have different challenges. So like for us, hiring women is not a challenge.
Right.
But we might have other challenges that we need to say, okay, well, we have a lot of women in our organization, so maybe that's not a challenge or a problem. Right. But
how can
we make ourselves more educated, therefore more inclusive, more diverse? Like, okay, well, maybe we're like girl power all the way, right? But what else can we do with that? How can we harness that enthusiasm?
Yeah.
Beyond hiring.
Yeah.
Empower women.
Well, that's great advice. I think, taking that approach of, fixing it from the inside out, it's just kind of a different way of thinking. It's almost like, I compare it to like, you go to the doctor and, they can't just prescribe a pill to fix everything. A lot of times it's what's going on behind the scenes and looking at the big picture. So this is just awesome advice.
If you start with the I, then go to the E, you can get the diversity. That's what I think that when I've had people, outside the organization ask, I'm like, if you can do the inclusion first, then you can get the diversity and make the diversity stick. Yeah. You almost got to do it in reverse than the way we say it.
Yeah. I mean, and this is just, it's helped me kind of, because this is it can feel like such a big undertaking. Yeah. And you being able to break that down for us, obviously in leadership and then for our team, so that everyone is on the same page, everyone has the buy-in, everyone understands what we're doing, and there's no surprises, and there's no, and if there's questions, they come to you, and and we talk about it together. Yeah,
and that's exactly right what you just said about the buy-in, because it needs to be upline all the way to top leadership, but it also needs to be downstream all the way to your part-timers or your interns or your junior people. It needs to be totally, it's not, as we said before, it's not one person's burden to fix everything. So get the buy-in, make it inclusive, and then you have an amazing work culture to bring whoever you want to bring it into, and it's equitable, and then you can bring rock stars in and have a wonderful workplace.
Yes.
A sense of belonging.
Absolutely. Well, this is awesome. Is there anything else that you want to share with the audience?
Just that I think it takes time and it is emotionally burdensome, and like that's okay. Sometimes it feels like it's not okay to say, right? Because it's really important and it's really topical, right now and in the last couple of years. And I think when I've talked to people both here and outside of here, they kind of are very hesitant to say those things. Like it's a sensitive topic. Like it is a sensitive topic. Or
do you think that there's fear there in just the way that they'll be perceived, or even just how the organization will address or embrace, like kind of what they're...
or even I think just maybe, we're in such a digitally connected age, right? To take the second to say, I can't do this all today, or this is a lot, or I'm feeling emotionally burnt out from this, that is there going to be some sort of backlash, like, oh, what, like, so diversity is like too hard, or it's taking too much of your time, and so I think there is a sensitivity there, but I know I've told people, like, it's okay that this is emotionally burdensome, that's okay. It's okay that some of these conversations, you might have to go into a space that is uncomfortable or self-reflective, like, that's okay, and it's okay to say, like, it's emotionally tolling. And that's okay. But I think that the more you can get whole organizational buy-in, the more that's spread out instead of it being on, one person or 5 people or whatever.
I love that. Awesome.
Amazing.
Well, this has been so great. I hope that you have all gotten some gold nuggets out of this. I know I have. And it's a constant learning and growing experience. So I'm excited to see how far Recruiterboom comes in a year and beyond.
Yeah,
and exciting. Just, if you ever have any questions, about, say for your company, you're implementing a diversity program, or maybe you're a small company or a startup, it doesn't really matter what size. I think we're all kind of in this together. And just grateful to have somebody like Kate who is spearheading everything. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm grateful to be at an organization that is receptive and wants to learn and wants to hear it and wants to buy in. It's exciting.
Totally. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned for the next episode. We are going to have more exciting topics and guests. So thank you so much for watching and listening, and stay tuned.
Thank you.